Hey, welcome back. Level 6 Fabrication. I'm Chris, that's cameraman Mac, and this is our Ferrari. Kidding. This is our CRX. This is a 91. We're going to mod the shit out of this because it's a little too far gone to restore. As you saw in our little promotional one, as we were taking things apart a bit, it just has too much rust. The body's tweaked too much. I mean, it could be restored, but we'd be talking about a $60,000, $70,000 restoration. Just cutting panels away, putting back the proper one, all the metal shaping if we can't find the factory pieces, just all that kind of stuff. So we figured, what's the next best thing? Let's take one of the lightest cars that's ever been produced for street use, and let's go and tube frame it and throw some weird engine in. But before we do any of that kind of stuff, squaring this thing back up is very important. So we've been taking a bunch of measurements. What we're going to do today is strip the interior out so we can get any unnecessary weight out of the vehicle that might be adding forces from different angles, just to reduce the stress on the body. Then what we're going to do is measure again. Check all the different angles, cross measure it, make sure we're as close to square as possible before we start doing anything major here. So after we strip the interior, at least from the firewall back, what we're going to do is we're actually probably going to get some, we're bending some tube today as well, which is good, because what we want to do is we want to get the main hoop in. That's where your build is based off of. You really want to, you don't want anything to tweak after you make more mess for yourself. So we want to get that main hoop in. We want to get it gusseted into it. That way, whatever we have to cut out, because we're going to be cutting a lot out, let's be honest, we don't want it to affect what the end product is going to be. We always want to keep this as square as possible, because we're going to cut, I'm going to be honest, we're going to cut most of the metal out. There's not going to be a lot of floor here. We're going to put a lot of carbon back. We're going to do some really cool molding, shaping, pulling molds, creating cool plugs, and just going with whatever looks good. Like, with the Bentley, we had more of a goal in mind. This one is just, let's do something stupid. From there, what we're going to do is, if we find it's close enough to square, we're going to bend the main hoop. So you will see us bending some metal today, because we're going to get that in the car, gusseted, so that you don't get a lot more twisting after we start cutting more of the metal out. We haven't figured out what driveline we're going to put in here. Putting a K-series in, wow, imagine that. That's the same thing as throwing an LS and everything else. I mean, we do have an LS here. We did pull that out. That'd be really cool, but I don't really want an LS in here either. So what are we going to do? Comment below. Tell us what ideas you have for us to put in here. We think we know what we're going to do. It's not a Honda, so haters, you can either not watch now or tell us in the comments how we're going to ruin a classic. The nice thing is what we're going to do to it allows us to easily put back, a Honda powertrain in here if we wanted to, but that's not the goal right now. The goal is to look like a CRX, make it even lighter, and see how close to a tube frame we actually end up with this. Basically, we're starting with a blank slate. As long as we can square this thing up, we're going to make it look as wild as we can, because we've got a bunch of car shows, we've got track meets, we got all that kind of stuff where we just want to go have fun. All right, so as we were mentioning, she's a bit rough. As you can see down there, we got a lot of rust. It looks like it was rusted out. Someone still tried jacking up. You can see by how the gap is completely, like, it just gets wider as it goes up. Like, yeah, it's missing a trim piece here, but you can still see how it does that. You can hear it bind as I open it. So it needs some work. So what we're going to do is like I said, we're going to take some measurements diagonally. We're going to check to see how square it actually is inside. And then what we want to do is the main hoop, which sits usually around here, we want to get that measured up, find the angles, get it as close to the peripheries. I know you get some people, they just go straight up and over, and then they gusset it with giant plates like that. That's sloppy. I'm sorry, the fabricators out there, if that's the way you do it, there's nothing wrong with it. That's passable by the governing bodies who, that say that, as long as you have a roll cage that meets this, and this, doesn't matter. I like to follow it closer. If I have more than an inch gap, I think I've personally done it wrong. That's just me. I'm not sorry. I shouldn't have picked on other people. You do it your way. We're going to show you how we do it. I like that because if the closer to the peripheries of the car you get, the more room it leaves. You can move your seat a little further back, the closer you get to the roof. I'm vertically challenged, so it doesn't matter. But someone like Mac, who's well over 6 feet, with a helmet, you have to be able to do. You have to clear your helmet with the cage, and from there, it's not a convertible. Let's say it was though. You have to be able to do that. To the next brace, you have to be, I believe it's 3 inches under that diagonal. Well, that's really difficult to do if you're that far from the roof. Again, I'm blabbing. That's what we're going to do. We're going to take some measurements, and then I've got an angle finder here to figure out what angles we're going to have to bend at and roughly where we are. Pen, paper, don't do it off, maybe it's because I'm old and I forget things, but I like to just write it down so when I'm over at the bender, I can check what I've done. And you know what? I'll even come back and measure a second or third time to make sure it's done right. Because that's the first thing someone's going to pick at if you're at a car show. They're going to take a shot at, oh, your welding's bad, your bends are bad. Just do it right the first time. What is it? Measure twice, cut once? There's a reason that came up. So anyways, I'm talking too much again. We're going to get in here, we're going to measure some stuff up. Hopefully we'll get bending soon. But first off, we're going to make sure that everything's fairly square. This was so important. We were very lucky. Internally, it's within 1/8 of an inch, which is basically tolerances from the factory when you're not building, extreme cars and stuff like that. For mass production, spot welding, that's actually dead on. What we did find when we pulled this seam, we'll get Mac to come in, this panel has been replaced at some point. You can see how they drilled out spot welds and put it back in. This is all rough. What we did find, and we couldn't figure out originally without pulling the seal, is that this is actually still pushed in. So we were actually a full 1/4 of an inch off. That I don't want. It was a 1/4 to about 3/8. Now I was like, that's not acceptable. We got to figure out where it is. But it's right here. So we figured that out just by using this for a couple minutes. So that's not overly important. We're going to take more measurements from the inside before we build the cage to make sure that both arches match. And then we're ready to go. We actually lucked out here. I think one of the areas we're going to have a problem is connecting this to the firewall. But we'll show you how to do that later once we've done what we're doing to the back end. It takes a little extra time. You use a little extra tube. What I find really, really useful is get yourself a cheater bar. And that is something that you bend to a radius that you're going to keep in your head. The easy one is 90. That just makes the most sense because then you can put it up to anything. And once you're really good at figuring angles, you can figure out, you might not even need an angle finder if you're good at judging things based off of 90. This will save you so much time if, let's say, your digital protractor, you run out of batteries, or you need to build something really quick, because knowing that this is 90, if you need something, like I'll go in here and show you, I can probably just guess and get probably within 90% accuracy, keeping it all tucked where we want to. What it also does is it tells you where to start your bend. I don't know how many people I've seen bend it, like they'll take a measurement, but they'll start the bend here, not compensating for how much actually has to get fed into the machine. So while they make the exact right angle that they needed to make for it to fit, the center section is actually too wide. And you're not allowed to cut bars and shrink them and weld them back together. It has to be done in one continuous piece, or you don't meet tech when they inspect your cage. That's where this stuff helps. This shows me right where I set it into the die to start bending, and it shows me how much metal is used up making a 90-degree bend. I like to clean these off as well because they come with a coating on it so it doesn't rust, as you can see. So, knowing that this is 90, if I go and tuck this up against the roof and butt it up, look how close we are already. If we were just interested in making a quick cage, we could literally bend a 90 or a 100 and go straight down to the ground. We wouldn't worry about this gap at all. But because we really want to get close to it, we're probably going to put 2 bends in. But look how close that is already, knowing that it's 90. Knowing that this is 90, this would hit here. So all we do is we put like 100 to 102 degree bend in it, and it'd probably meet up perfectly on the ground. But going off this, if we didn't have an angle finder and we wanted to follow this, I would start my first bend by hitting it at about 75 degrees, and I bet you we'd be damn close. So what we're gonna do now is use the angle finder. We're gonna use the pad and paper. We're gonna start taking some angles. Like, this isn't a perfectly straight line, so you can't tuck it. I believe the rules say you can only put 4 bends in a tube for the main hoop. Otherwise, you could get a big wheel bender and make a nice arch, but you're not allowed to actually do that. It looks good, you know, for a build, but you're not allowed to put all that arc and radius in it. So you can put a bend here on both sides. There's your 4, you're done. You can also just do 1 here and 1 there, you're done. The moment you put a 5th bend in on this hoop, it's no longer a legal cage. I know I'm beating on these points a lot, but putting in this one wrong and then building everything else off of it, you're wasting time, and tubing is so expensive. I think a 20-foot length, Mac, how much was it?
It was $240.
That's Canadian, so 160 US if you want to base it off that. And that's just 1.5 inch 120 wall. And we're going to use what looks like about 9 feet here. So half of that money is out the window every time I mess this up.
And it's worth noting as well that that's DOM tubing. That's not, that's not chromoly.
Yeah, that's not chromoly. We don't need it for this. We're not going to be TIG welding this one. This is more racetrack application, so we're not worried about having like a SEMA build where the welds look like they were done. You know what I'm getting at. So we're going to be MIG welding this. We went with DOM, didn't go with chromoly. Chromoly just gets more expensive.
Well, depending on the chromoly that we would have picked, comparables in the market would have cost up to 4 times as much for the same length.
Yeah.
Yeah, the advantage is that you get lighter weight and you could run thinner wall to get the same strength. The question is, do you want to spend the money to get there?
Yeah, and the reality is the amount of metal we'd use in here, we already did the calculations, we'd only save about 40 pounds. I know the hardcore racers are going to be like, 40 pounds is 40 pounds. This thing's going to come in somewhere around 1,400 to 1,500 pounds. I'm not worried about 40. We just want to have fun with this thing. If we were building an FIA racer with unlimited rules and just go at it, yeah, we'd do everything we could. But you know what? We're paying for it. We don't bring on sponsors to do this kind of stuff. So I'm okay with the 35 to 38 pounds. We figure it's going to weigh extra. Instead of getting Cameraman Mac to help me, I'm going to show you, because maybe you won't have help. So what I'm going to do is show you a different technique if you're doing this stuff all by yourself. What I like to do is pick where I'm going to put my bends. Then I take a piece of tape. I'm going to get it close to where I want it, and then I'll come back with a pen and actually mark where I'm going to take a measurement where I want the center of. You can pick it whether it's either going to be the center of the bend or the start of the bend. I like to mark the start of the bend, just for that's how I do it. You learn whatever way works best for you. We're just here to help you with tips and tricks to get you where you need to go. So my first point, this is a nice point of reference right here. This car actually goes out and in as opposed to just across, down, down. So it's actually making this C shape. But that's where I'm going to clean this off, and I'm going to put that there as a starting point, just so it's easy for you to see. Normally I just take a Sharpie and mark it on the chassis. The next place I would like to start my bend, conveniently there's another hole right there, so we'll do that. And then I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. You'd think, this is another way to double check measurements, you'd think that'd be parallel on the other side. Doesn't always work out like that, but you know what? Never hurts to do another measurement. As you can see, this is flush, that one's pushed in. So we are going to do a little bit of massaging over there later on. The roof is still okay over there. It's this piece that wasn't corrected properly when it was re-welded. So I'm going to put this here. We'll be back. Got to go find the pens right there. And then this is where I put this. So that just gives me a generalized, this is what I'm working with. So the nice thing about a measuring tape or a straight edge is you can run it fairly straight and figure out roughly where your bends are going to go. Another factor is what your floor looks like. This is fairly flat, but as you can see, it dips in right here. So then what you're going to have to do is you're either going to have to cut this out and build a flat plate, or you're going to have to build a box to base your cage off of, which means you're going to have to follow all these profiles. What a lot of people will do is just make a big plate, weld it across, and then cut other pieces that'll take up this odd shape. And you can do that with cardboard, whatever. I know I'm over explaining it, but I don't want to miss any points. But just because it's better to measure long and cut back, let's go all the way down here just for the sake of argument. So we're just going to pick a spot that gets us a straight up line as close as we can based off the low point down there. Well, I want the bend to start. Here's where the majority of the bend is, but it has to start beforehand. I want that bend at, that's 19. I want it at 19 and a half. All right, so that bend is going to start there, which actually means the bend will probably happen closer to around. You'll learn this as you do it, and the nice thing is if you leave it long, you just cut off the bottom. That's good. You don't want to start the bend here and then find out you're coming in way up here. I'd rather start it a little further and just take a 1/4 inch off the pipe and let it, as it comes down, it'll fill in the spot nicely. Now, the bend for the roof, I think I want that right at 32, which is right there. Right there. You also have to decide how you're going to bend this. Are you going to put the tube, and it's different for everybody. Some people like to start the tube dead center on the tube and work their way out. Okay, here's the center of the tube. Let's say it's 10 feet. You mark 5 feet on the tube. Then you work away from it. So you find the center point, which is roughly there. You'd measure it out, but that's where the light was, and there's a hole there. And let's say the first bend happened at 2 feet. Okay, you bend that one at 2 feet, that one at 2 feet, and then put this one in. It does make a difference because you don't start the bend at the same point. If you're starting from here, the bend starts before the bend working off here. But if you're starting one side going to the other, the bend has to start on the other side of your center line. I don't know if that makes sense. Please ask questions in the comments. We will elaborate. We're just telling you how this is going to work. So we know that we went, I think, 19 and a half here, 32 there, and that's where we're going to put that arch. And it should tuck up nicely. I'll make sure it works over there. I'm not going to kill more of your time there. But what I'm going to do now is get a generalized distance for the rough cut of the tube. This will end up being longer just because I'm going to follow all of this. And there's no way we're going to be able to bend it perfectly just because, like I said, it creates this convex shape that isn't. We're going to aim to get it as close as we can, but not have to bend back into the car. Because structurally, if you roll over, you don't want more angles. You want the pipe straight up and down. But for side collision, you want it to get as close to this as possible. So I'm going to just measure all the way around. I'm going to add these up. I may have to do it in sections, but that's why we've got all this stuff here. So I'll tuck it in there. This is why having a second person always helps, but I'm just going to show you how to do it if you're by yourself. Just keep working your way across, pinning it to the body. Yes, it's going to give you a longer tube than you need, but it's better to add that extra 3 or 4 originally than find out there wasn't enough. So just keep following it around, make sure you stay tight to all the bends. Okay. Don't worry, I caught that one there, I knew where it was. All the way over. Okay. Whoops, sorry, that's 76. Down to there, so we're right at 90 on the tape. And all that stuff's in the way, but I'll add a little extra. And we're at 9'2". So let's mark out this tube and bend. Let's bend some tube. And like I said, I'm guessing it's 80 degrees. Let's find out if I'm buying another tube or Cameraman Max buying me dinner.